Hey, I'm Danielle, and today we are talking about must-read personal development books, everything from career to habits to motivation, all that good stuff. So all the books that I'm going to be sharing with you today are actually the personal development books that I read this past year. Flashing back to 2020, I read 0 books from cover to cover. With everything going on, I completely dropped off my reading habit, and then I made a goal at the end of the year saying in 2021, I'm going to read 10 books. And you know what? I read 8.5. Not bad. One of those is still in progress. I'm filming this halfway through December, so I'm working on it. And another one was a novel, but 7 of those I read from cover to cover, and those are the personal development books that I am going to be sharing today. So before we dive into those super quick, I just want to say one thing about either getting back into reading or starting a reading habit altogether, and that is that it's okay to start small. It's really easy to get stuck in this all or nothing mindset, like, if I don't read 10 books, then I might as well have not read it all. And that sounds a little bit ridiculous as I say it, but it's really just about progress. And we do get caught in that mindset, even though it's funny to, hear it spoken like that. It's kind of how we think at times where, we don't even want to start if we're not going to achieve the goal. And I'm like super happy with having made much more progress than I did the year before, even if I didn't, reach the goal. So starting small can totally be doable and totally worth it. Something is better than nothing. Reading most days is better than reading no days. And honestly, reading 1 book is better than reading 0 books. Let's be honest. It's all about progress. So as we go through these 7 books, I'm kind of going to give you a read this book if, and hopefully you can find one out of the 7 that really clicks with what you need right now. These books are in no particular order, but let's start with Grit by Angela Duckworth. I really liked this book. I found it really interesting how much she dove into the importance of effort. I feel like this is sort of the next step to the book mindset, if you've heard of it, talking about not having the fixed mindset, but more of the growth mindset. It's not about what you're born with, it's about the effort you're putting in. And so she really talks about how the effort you put in and how that translates into persistence that can help you achieve results is really exciting and really inspiring. And at the end of the day, she's basically saying that talent doesn't matter that much if you put in the effort and really stick with it. So I would say read this book if you want encouragement to work hard. The next one is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This one honestly blew up, and the reason I bought it is just because I kept seeing it everywhere. And, everyone can use another habits book, right? The way he breaks it down into these different concepts was really helpful, and it's just this important reminder that small actions build up to big results. Actually, I feel like that's the subhead. Yeah, tiny changes, remarkable results. It says it right there on the cover. And I bought 2 copies of this. I gave it to a friend, and we've just been like texting back and forth about it. And actually at a networking event a couple nights ago, someone says, hey, have you read Atomic Habits? I was like, actually, I finished it a few weeks ago. So I just feel like a lot of people are getting to know about this book, and it's really bringing some important concepts to the surface. It's easy to read. It, has a lot of practical examples, and it just breaks down how to actually build out those habits in small ways at first with, plenty of different tips and tactics. So if you need a reminder that small actions really do add up, this thing is great, and read this book if you want to build new habits. Next, we have Everything is Figureoutable by Marie Forleo. I loved her. I've loved her a long time. This was actually a reread this year, and it was the first one I read of the year. I went to her book launch event for this. It was in Austin, Texas. I visited a friend, and it was a really good time. And her whole mindset around everything is figureoutable. It ties into this beautiful story with her mom. And read this book if either you've been around personal development, read personal development stuff for a while, and you kind of need to come back to basics, or if you're new to personal development and you need to kind of get that foundational stuff to really have an understanding of, how to grow, this is the book that you want to read. I think she really covers all the bases in a really funny, interesting, exciting way. So this is definitely a good one to turn to. The next one we're talking about is Wintering. This is by Catherine May. And I actually got this as a gift a year ago for Christmas from my best friend growing up, Leah. Shout out to Leah. And I saw the title, Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. And for whatever reason, going into 2021, I was like feeling good. I was not sort of burdened with life challenges in the way that sometimes things pop up. Like, I was feeling good. And then halfway through the year, I started going through some stuff, and I really turned to this book, and I feel like it's exactly what I needed. The poetic language in this book, the stories, it's just like a really like gentle and thoughtful and deep book. And if you're going through a tough time and it's like, maybe you're like trying to force yourself to read a personal development book and it's like very like rah and you're like, this is not what I need at all right now, turn to something like this. So if you're having a hard time, read this book, because there are some important sort of like concepts related to personal growth, but it's not pushy. It's gentle. So definitely read this book if you can relate to needing that right now. Okay, before we're done with this book, I need to read one quote. I just popped it open. I remember this was one of my favorites. She says, "This is a crossroads we all know, a moment when you need to shed a skin. If you do, you'll expose all those painful nerve endings and feel so raw that you'll need to take care of yourself for a while. If you don't, then the skin will harden around you. It's one of the most important choices you'll ever make." This like hit me where I needed it when I read this at the time. I was like trying to make a really tough decision and feeling like crap at the time. And this was a really good one with really good timing for me. The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This one is a classic. If you can't tell by all my dog ears and highlights, I will just tell you, this book is so witty, so funny, so real. This book talks all about resistance, and when you are trying to go out on a limb, do something creative, and really put yourself out there, and you feel this resistance, you're kind of blocking yourself, read this book. Honestly, it's just like the humor in it just really gets to you in a way where, you know, a serious book might not. And at the same time, it really does get to the root of like what this resistance thing is, almost as if it's its own kind of persona. And I love it. He's such a gifted writer. And this one's a winner every time. So I would say read this book if you are currently self-sabotaging, whether it's in a business, a creative project, or anything else. While I said these are in no particular order, these last couple I think are my favorites that I read this year. This one, The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. I would not shut up about this book to everyone I was talking to while I was reading it. I was like, it's just so good. The metaphors, the storyline, the language, the everything. Like, I was and still am obsessed with this book. I think it came out within the last year, and I hadn't read a Martha Beck book before. She's written several books, like 10 or something. This book, Finding the Path to Your True Self. While that subhead sounds a little bit cheesy, this book has like 0% cheesiness in it, I promise. It takes you through the story of Dante's Inferno, which I didn't know a ton about, to be honest, but it kind of compares these stages of like returning to yourself if you're kind of like almost in the wrong life or feeling like you're in the wrong life, what it takes to really realize that and kind of return home to yourself. Okay, now I'm being cheesy, but just take my word for it. This book is incredible. The way it's crafted, the way it's written, it just really like captures you in and you can't stop reading it, and I just adore it. So read this book if in any way you're feeling lost in life right now. Whether you feel like you haven't felt like yourself in a while, or almost as if you're like in the wrong movie. I kind of had a moment like that earlier this year, and I read this book and it just gave me what I really needed. The important reminders, the grounding feeling. It's exactly what I needed. So if you're feeling lost in life, please do yourself a favor and read this book. And the last one that we have to talk about, and also the last one that I've most recently finished reading, is U-Turn by Ashley Stahl. This book is all about career and discovering what you're meant to do and pursuing that path. This is the big career suggestion book out of this list. This is the first book that she's published, and honestly, you can't tell. It's written so well. But what's cool is I heard her interviewed on a podcast and immediately like DM'd her and was like, that podcast interview was so great, and she responded right away. And I ended up buying the book just to learn more about the topic, the core strengths that she was talking about in the podcast episode. But then everything else about this book was just incredibly helpful. I think both the actual concepts as well as her sharing deeply her personal story, both in everything that was going on in her life over the last several years, in addition to her sort of wanderings in her career. And I feel like when you're feeling lost in your career, you can feel isolated, you can feel alone, and you kind of don't get to see inside someone else's world when they're going through that process. I mean, that's what I try to do in my videos of being like, I'm figuring things out. But at the end of the day, like, to see where someone is now and all of the steps and the sort of winding path that they took to get there, and then them being like super successful, that's really a gift. And I just adored this book. And so I've kind of dog-eared the different key concepts that she has, and she talks about like core values, core nature, core interests, and breaks down the actual things to understand about yourself in order to choose a career path that's right for you. So it's very practical, but also again, like the stories and feeling like I could see inside someone else's world as they were just struggling to figure out what to do next in their career. That was super helpful for me. So needless to say, read this book if you're feeling lost in your career, and I promise it will help. The cool thing is too that when I DM'd her and bought her book, she said if you leave a review, then you can have a 15-minute like career coaching session with me. So I actually did that and got to chat with her for 15 minutes and just heard a little bit more from her, and honestly, it was amazing. So that's kind of cool that I actually met her, and she's a really genuine person, it seems. So cool, fun fact. Read this book, it's awesome. These are all the books that we've talked about today. I will link them all below so it's easy to pull them up on Amazon and whatnot. And I've made a few different videos about my reading lists and books to read, so I'll link those all below if you're interested in hearing a little bit more. So a couple final tips as we're wrapping up. I would say if you're pulling together, a book list for the next year, maybe throw in a novel too. I ended up reading a book. I don't have it with me because I lent it to a friend, but it was nice to sort of mix it up by having an actual just full-on story in there, a novel. So throw that in if you're not a huge novel reader, give it a go. And also with the personal development books themselves, come up with kind of your system for like highlighting, annotating and stuff, because for me, I write notes on the side of the margins and I highlight like the key sort of phrases and takeaways and everything, and it's really helpful to kind of flip back through. So whether you do that or you're like taking notes or you're flagging pages, find what works for you. And I don't know, like I might go back through all these books in the next couple weeks before the year wraps up and kind of get a refresher on some of those key takeaways. So in whatever way that you want to review and apply the stuff that you're learning, find a system that works for you. And we will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I also talk about all things personal growth and career development, so definitely click the subscribe button to see my videos popping up in your feed. And that is about it. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye!